What is up everyone and welcome back to a new VR tutorial. So in this video I will show you how to create custom and pose animation when grabbing an object. So this video is divided in two parts. In the one that you are watching right now, we will implement the basic system for the right hand, and in the next one we will build upon it to smoothly blur between the hand position and automatically generate the left pose based on the right one. So if you'd like to support my work and learn VR development better, faster, stronger, join us, link in the description. But without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so as you can see, I'm inside a new Unity project. I've already set up here a XR rig with hand presence from here, the left hand model and the right hand model. And as you can see, using the animated hand on input component that we made in the second episode of my tutorial series on how to make a VR game with the Unity XR Toolkit, I'm able to animate here this hand model based on the input I give from my controllers. Also on top, I've added for both of these hands here this XR direct interactor that will allow me to grab this gun that I have here sitting on this table. But now if I click on play, as you can see, my hand is animated. So if I press on the grip button, it does the fist pose. And when I grab this object, it will keep this fist pose when holding it, which is not that immersive. So here our goal will be to change this hand animation and position to match the gun model. Now a solution could be to go here in the right hand model, open the animator, and in the blend tree, as you can see, we have here all of the animation that are updating the pose of our hand, and we could actually add a new animation and trigger it when we hold the gun. But this would take a lot of time to do and would turn this animator into a spaghetti component. Instead, we are going to use this same right hand model on this gun and update the bone position by code. So are you ready? Let's get started. And the first thing I'm going to do is to create a component that will do nothing but gather some data from these two left hand models. And basically, this tutorial will work for any hand model, so feel free to adjust it for your own game. So right now, I'm going to select both of these hands, click on hand component, and I'm going to create a hand data component. Perfect. Now we can open this component. We can also get rid of the start and the update function. And inside the script, I'm going to add a public enum and model type left right. So this will give us enum properties that say if the end model is left or right, and that will be helpful for the future part of this tutorial. So next we can add this end model type with public and model type and call it end type. There you go. Now already, if I save and go back to Unity, now as you can see, I have a parameter of type and model type, and I can change it from left to right. Perfect. Now the next parameter that we are going to need is a public transform called root, then a public animator called animator, and finally the most important, a public transform array that will gather the finger bones transform. There you go. Now let's save and go back to Unity. The next step will be to set the parameter of this end data component for each end. So for the left end model, I'm going to set the end type to left. Perfect. For the root, we can drag here the left end model. For the animator, we can drag the animator on this end. But now for the finger bone, this is a bit more complicated. We can lock these windows. We can now go into the bones of this object. Can do easily expand all of the children by pressing on the Alt key. There you go. It will display all of the children. And now what we need is to drag here each bone of the finger. So the index, the middle, the pinky, the ring, and the thumb. Okay, so for the left hand, let's add these 3 for the index, these 3 for the middle finger, these 4 for the pinky, these 3 over there for the ring, and these 3 for the thumb. And there you go. We can drag them in the finger bones component. And here they are all. So make sure that it keeps the same orders. This will be really important for what's happening next. Now we can unlock this inspector and do exactly the same thing, but this time for the right hand. So change the end type, set the root, the animator, lock the window, expand the bones of the children, and gather all of the finger bones. Okay, here you go. As you can see now, we have both our right and left hand model that have a end data component set up, and which we will be able to use to animate the bones of these hands when it's grabbing an object. So next, we can override its prefab by clicking here and apply all. There you go. Make sure to unlock the inspector, and now we can do the same. So go for the left hand, and click on override, apply all. There you go. Okay, now that we have overridden these two prefab that we can see in the Oculus and prefab folders, we will be able to create our first pose. So I'm going to drag here the right-hand model as a children of the pistol over there. So in this case, the end is super huge because the pistol has a scale of 444. So we can simply get the normal size of this end by dividing the scale by 4. There you go. So now, as you can see, it has a normal size. And just from here, we can edit the position of this end first. We can change also the orientation. Perfect. So this looks good to me. Now that we've set the position and rotation of the end compared to the object that we want to grab, we can set the position of the fingers. So for this, let's go to the bone of the finger. I will start by the index. Here, make sure that the pivot is set to local pivot. There you go, so that you will be able to more easily rotate the fingers. So little advice here, just don't move, only rotate these fingers. Okay, and once you are happy with the pose that you just made, I think I'm good with this one, we can get rid of the animator component like this, because we don't want any animation on this object. And now I'm going to select the parent and add a new component that I will call grab and pose. There you go. So the purpose of this component will be to trigger here the pose when we are grabbing this object. Okay, so now that we are inside this component, let's add at the top using Unity engine.xr.interaction.toolkit. And I'm going to get the grab interactable component at the start of the game. So we can do XR grab interactable and call it grab interactable equals get component of type XR grab interactable. There you go. And now I'm going to create a new function that I will call public void setup pose, and that will take as a parameter a base interaction event argument called arg. Perfect. And now using this function, we can trigger the setup pose function when we are grabbing this object by doing grab interactable dot select enter dot add listener, and we can just add the setup pose function that we just made. Okay, so now let's work a bit on the setup pose function. The first thing that I'm going to do is actually add at the top a reference to the end data component on the right hand pose that we have. So public end data and call it right hand pose. There you go. Now to set up the pose, I first want to make sure that the interactor interacting with this interactable is of type XR interactor. So we can do if arg.interactor object is XR direct interactor. So if it's the case, we can do the setup. So let's first gather the end data component of this interactor. So this is actually the end data on the right hand model. So we can have it by doing end data and data equals arg.interactor object dot transform dot get component of type and data. There you go. We can disable the animator of the right hand by doing enddata.animator.enable equals false. And so this should actually free the right hand model when it's grabbing the object. And before leaving and testing what we already made, we also want to just deactivate this grab and pose at the start of the game. So let's do right hand pose.gameObject.setActive pose. There you go. And so just like this, we should be able to grab here this gun but freeze the right hand model animation. So let's try this by clicking on play. Of course, just before testing our game, make sure that the right hand model pose is added here in the right hand pose parameter of the grab and pose component. So let's drag it just like this. And now if we click on play, it should make this right hand model disappear. And when we grab this gun with and following our position, it should freeze it. So let's click on play. Oh, and it didn't work because I forgot to add something. Actually, when we are trying to get the end data component, it's not on the interactor or game object that we have the end data. As you can see, it's on the children. So we actually need to get the component on the children and not on the interactor as well. So to get this, we can actually do get component in children instead over there. And now everything should work. Okay, so as you can see, I can still animate the end, but when I try to grab the gun, it frees the end in the middle of the animation, and now I cannot change it. And so now that this animation is freeze, this means that we will be able to change the bone position at our will. And the goal here is, of course, to change it to match here the position of the pose over there. So let me show you how we can do this. So back into the script, the first thing that we are going to do is actually gather some data between the two poses. So the current end pose position of the interactor and the position of the pose that we have sitting on the pistol. So for this, I'm going to create a new function that I will call public void set end data values. Perfect. This will need two parameters. So the first one is the end data component for one end and another for the second end. There you go. So the goal here is to set the initial and final value of the end so that we will be able to go from one to the other. So now that this function is created, we are going to add some parameter at the top over there. So first one, a private vector3 called starting end position. Now the same, but this time called final end position. Next, we can do exactly the same as well, but this time for the rotation. So starting end rotation and private quaternion, final end rotation. There you go. And finally, two private array of quaternion that are going to be the starting finger rotation and of course the same thing but for the final, so the final finger rotation. Perfect. And all of these variables are going to be set inside the set hand data value function that we made. It's actually really easy to set them up. So let's do starting end position equals the end. We get the root and then the local position of the first end. So now do the same but for the final position, but this time using final end position equals this time the same thing but for the second end, so root.local position. Now we can do the same but for the rotation, so starting end rotation equals h1.root.local rotation, and then final end rotation equal the second end root local rotation. Perfect. And so the last thing that we need to gather is now the finger bone rotation. We can do starting finger rotation equals new quaternion and create an array that has for the size, the first end, the finger bones, and the length. There you go. And now, same thing for the final finger rotation. We can give it the same initialization. It doesn't matter here if we say h1 or h2. And we can set both of these values inside a for loop that will go from I to the length of the finger bone. So h1.fingerbones.length in our case. And we can set them with starting finger bone rotation I equals the first end, the finger bones I, and its local rotation. There you go. And now exactly the same, but for the final end with the other hand. Okay, phew. So now all of the parameters and variables that we need are gathered using this set hand data values function. So we can of course call it here when we are setting our pose. So we can do set hand data values. For the starting end, it's of course the position of the end data from the interactor. And for the second end, it's of course the position of hand pose on the interactable. So the right hand pose in our case. And now that we have the correct data for the pose that we want, and now of course the last thing we need to do is set the bone and end position using the starting and final position that we have gathered. So let's add a new function that I will call public void set end data. So this function will need an end data parameter called h, which is the end data model that we want to change. And here I'm going to add as a parameter the value that we want to give it. So first we need the position of the end, so a vector3 called new position, then a quaternion called new rotation, and for the bones we can do an array of quaternion called new bones rotation. There you go. And now simply using all of these parameters we can do h.root.local position equals new position, h.root.local rotation equals new rotation. And now, as we did earlier, we can lerp in the length of the bones, so new bones rotation.length, and assign the new value with h.fingerbone I.local rotation equals new bone rotation I. Perfect. And now everything is set. We can just call the set end data function after the set end data values function. And now it will need the end data on the interactor, so end data, the new position, so we can do final end position, final end rotation, and finally final finger rotation. And as simple as this, we have finished with our script. It should, when we are grabbing an object, set the value that we want to target and assign them with the setEndData function. So let's test this by clicking on play. Okay, so now as you can see, I can move my hand, and when I try to grab the pistol, oh, it seems that the bones are taking the good rotation, but the position of my hand is completely off. So it seems that both the position and rotation are not doing great. So let me show you how to fix this problem. For the problem of the rotation of the hand, it's simply because this gun is using a component that we made that is called XR Grab Interactable to attach, and that will snap the position using here the right attach point for the right hand and the left attach point for the left hand. And so to simply make sure that it gets the correct rotation, we need to set the right hand model pose under here the right attach point so that it will take the good local rotation into account when we grab it. So now if we click on play, as you can see, it's much better. Now we have the good rotation for the hand when we grab it, but the position is not working. And this is another problem that is happening for this gun based on here is scale. As you can see, the scale is set to 444, which means that when we are doing the local position for the right hand model, it needs to be 4 times bigger than the value that we are assigning it to. So to make sure that our hand position works even when the scale is not set to 111, we can actually divide here the starting hand position and final hand position by the scale of the hand. So this will be a bit long to write, but keep focused with me. So instead of the starting hand position, we can do new vector 3 and now assign it component by component. And so for the first one, we want ih1 root dot local position dot x and divide it by h1 dot root dot local scale dot x. And now we can do the same, but for the other component. So let's copy and paste this line 2 times. Perfect. And now instead of x, what I want to write is for the second component y. There you go. And for the third one, z. Perfect. And now the first starting end position is set. We can now copy all of this and assign it for the other end, but this time it's not h1 that we want, it's h2. So now we have set up the starting end position and final end position using the local position of both our end, but we have divided them by the local scale and it should fix our little problem. So let's see how it works by clicking on play. And now as you can see, if I grab, ta-da! I get the good position of my hand. This is perfect, but we have another issue right now. If I let go, the hand keep the same pose. So let's see how we can undo the pose once we ungrab the object. So first, as we did for the grab interactable when we select enter, we can call another function called unsetPose. So let's first create this function. I will call it public void unsetPose. It will take the same argument as its little friend. Perfect. And now we can call this function when we release the object with grab interactable.select exit.addListener unsetPose. Perfect. So the setup pose will be a bit the same as the setup pose, of course. So we can copy and paste this function. But this time for the animator, we want to enable it and not disable it. We really don't care about the setEndData value because they are already gathered in the setup pose function, so we can remove it. And now for the setEndData, instead of giving it the final end position and rotation and finger rotation, we can give it back the starting end position that we gathered earlier. So we can do starting end position, starting end rotation, and the starting finger rotation. Perfect. And now, as simple as it is, now using this, we should be able to retrieve the animation of the hand when we release the object. So let's see if this works by clicking on play. And there you go. I can grab the object, and when I release, I retrieve the position and I can animate it as we did before, so everything is now working. Okay guys, so I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial now that we have learned how to trigger and pause. In the next episode, I will show you how to smoothly lerp and how to easily mirror the right and pause to get the left one. So as always, make sure to subscribe to not miss the next video. Big shout out to my Patreon for supporting my work, and if like them you want to get access to the source code, join us, link in the description.